Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today's February 18th, 2025, and let's get to the news and updates happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? So I'll cover today the unexpected event that occurred in Saudi Arabia when the United States and Russia met for talks. And I'll give you guys some of my opinions of this meeting between the US counterparts and Russian counterparts. So as you can see here, Mr. Steve Witkoff, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz met with the Kremlin Foreign Policy Advisor Yuri Ushakov and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. After the talks concluded, a member of Russia's delegation said that the talks were, quote-unquote, not bad, but it was hard to say if the two sides' interests were converging. Neither Ukraine nor Europe had been invited for the main discussion, setting off alarm bells in Kyiv and capitals across the continent that US President Donald Trump and Putin could reach an agreement without Ukraine and Europe's involvement, and one that puts their future security in jeopardy. Also, following the Munich Security Conference last week, there was an emergency summit that was issued by French President Macron, who reaffirmed following this summit the need for strong security guarantees for Ukraine, and also warning that a ceasefire without Europe risks collapsing like the failed Minsk agreements. So, my thoughts and opinions with regards to the meeting between the United States and Russia is that this informational fog of war continues. We're seeing that the Trump administration has absolutely no alignment, and different members of his administration are saying different things. Whether it be pro-Ukraine or pro-Russian, we're seeing that there's no alignment, and it's on purpose, in my personal opinion. You could disagree, but I do believe that it's on purpose to allow the Trump administration to have a lot of maneuverability during these talks. When it is useful for them, there's a lot of push and pull here. And so this, as I've said, gives a lot of room for the Trump administration to maneuver in terms of the negotiations. Because if they just stick with Ukraine and not have some open room for Russia, there's a lot less opportunities for Trump. And we know that Trump, his help, his support, the way that he does policy is all about transactions, what he can get out of it. We need to see it from that type of prism, that type of paradigm. So first and foremost, I want to just highlight that we cannot get ahead of ourselves. I'm already hearing a lot of noise, a lot of statements on social media and in the news that basically everything has been decided on the backs of the Ukrainians. As far as I'm concerned, following this talk between the United States and Russia, the only point that they agreed upon is that they will continue holding talks. There's also been a lot of misinformation, likely spread by the Russians, that there's already been a ceasefire, several points that they agreed upon, that was spread by Fox News, and that was untrue. And we have to be aware that the Russians will try to sell victory every step of the way, based on nothing, right? That's going to be their game plan. Even Hegseth last week at the Munich Security Conference, he said that doesn't matter what happens during negotiations, the Russians will claim victory no matter what. So they're the masters in propaganda, misinformation, and also trolls operating in social media. And so they will continue spreading lies, insider information, where this is exactly what was discussed during the talks and the negotiations, when that actually is untrue. And so we need to be careful here. So let's be grounded and let's not get ahead of ourselves. Also, last point, something that I've been repeating multiple times, is that the United States can't afford to allow Russia to prevail against Ukraine. Not to say that they want Ukraine to prevail against Russia, because that's also something that the United States does not want. They don't want a strong Ukraine, but they don't want a strong Russia either. So they need to meet somewhere in the middle here. And to be quite fair with you, that is not that different compared to Biden's policy, except Biden was saying all the right things, doing all the right actions, but he wasn't following through with them. Let's not forget his de-escalation policy, where he constantly delayed aid to Ukraine when it was really necessary for Ukraine to have that timely assistance. So again, I think the Trump administration understands very well that if they show weakness during these negotiations, they will no longer be seen as the main player in any future negotiations, and they will lose that unipolarity that they're seeking, that Trump seeks. He wants to be at every negotiating table. He wants to be seen as the main player in any negotiations. And so then that will also hurt the United States, because China will take an even more active role and lead in protecting and securing the interests of smaller countries, as they see that, well, the United States is just backing away from everything, giving way to the Russians or to the Iranians and blah, blah, blah. And that will only open more opportunities for the Chinese. So, and you're even seeing that Keith Kellogg in the next 2 days will visit Kiev. So you're seeing as well that the United States will also meet with the Ukrainians, with Europe. And so this is just part of having talks with both sides. Trump is keeping his options open. But again, I need to reiterate that Trump is not pro-Ukraine, and Trump does not want, in his administration, do not want a strong Ukraine with clear and strong security guarantees, unfortunately. But we also need to be very pragmatic and also understand that the Trump administration isn't just going to sell off Ukraine like that, because Ukraine is strong and European allies have also awakened, thankfully, last week. Now, let's talk about another thing. The agreement on rare earth metals with the United States and Ukraine. So we have a little bit more details with regards to that, because the U.S. Treasury Secretary met with Zelensky last week, and we have more updates with regards to if it was agreed upon or not. And apparently Zelensky refused to sign this agreement to grant the United States 50% of all future reserves of rare earth metals in Ukraine. And Zelensky politely refused when this agreement was pushed to the Ukrainian administration. Zelensky felt like he was being asked unreasonably to sign something he hadn't had a chance to read. And Zelensky mentioned, or one of the sources mentioned, that I don't think he appreciated being given a take it or leave it thing. So they tried to quickly hurry Zelensky to sign something that he wasn't ready to sign. And Zelensky, his office said in a statement after the talks between Ukraine and the United States that they agreed to continue their work on drafting the document on economic partnership between the two countries. And Ukraine also repeated their demand for real security guarantees. So what I'm seeing here is that there's a new era as well of American foreign policy, a policy of transactionalism, where the US administration is no longer interested in mutually beneficial deals that work for both sides. And we've seen that clearly with JD Vance's, the vice president, his speech last week at the Munich Security Conference, where he pretty much said that Europe is destroying democratic values, the shared values between the United States and Europe, right? He just spit in the face of European countries during his speech. It's all about extracting the maximum gains and wins just for the United States alone, constantly pressuring partners to give in to the demands of the United States. This is the new policy by the United States, transactionalism and exploiting your partners. And here, what we're seeing clearly is that the United States tried to see if this would work on Ukraine, just to sign anything that they wanted. And thankfully, that failed. Zelensky did not give in to the pressures of the United States. They just probably saw an opportunity and told themselves, it doesn't hurt. What if it did work? What if Zelensky actually did sign this deal that would grant the US 50% of all future reserves of rare earth metals to Ukraine? I mean, that's ridiculous. And Ukraine not getting anything in return. Ukraine seeks real security guarantees. Could be different things, but you're seeing that the United States was not pushing that side, that portion of the deal to provide Ukraine something in return. So if anything, and I know that's not saying much, but Ukraine earned more respect for itself. Trump understood very well they can't just bully Ukraine so simply. Oh, we're just going to be pushing deals and they'll sign whatever because they're desperate. Clearly not. And we're seeing that, this same combination of policies and kind of negotiation tactics are being done against Canada and Mexico. We saw the exact same thing being done where Trump, with regards to Canada, which directly impacts me as a Canadian citizen, he was pushing for tariffs. Oh, if you don't want tariffs, well, you can become the 51st state. So you see the United States is aiming for the moon. And when it's convenient, they'll retract their position because they see that that can bite them back. with regards to the tariffs on Canada, we saw that 2 weeks ago, the markets reacted very badly, knowing that Trump was literally saying that, oh, on February 4th, we're going to go ahead with it. And he retracted it very quickly following a phone call with Mexico and Canada. So we're seeing that this is the new era of American foreign policy, transactionalism, and we need to see it from that type of lens, where the US is just going to try to get the most out of everybody, not just its historic allies, but also Russia, China, everybody. They don't see good guys, they don't see bad guys, they don't see in-betweens. Everybody is fair game in this new era of foreign policy for the United States. It's all about making America great again for Trump. Unfortunately, this will bite the Americans back, because if anybody has obviously worked with colleagues or managers, on an individual basis, if we're looking at it on an individual scenario, you've worked with colleagues likely that were like this, that wanted to get their way, were stepping over others, didn't want to hear feedback from you, didn't want to take into your perspective. And these types of people, you don't want to work with them in the long term, right? You might work with them in the short term, but in the long term, you give up on them. You don't want to work with them. And the United States, with this type of new foreign policy, will lose so much. It's like shooting yourself in the foot. Like allies will see the United States as somebody that is toxic, somebody that will always be pushing their interests first, and will simply disregard your interest. And so nobody will really want to work with the United States in the long term. And that will really hurt the Americans. Unfortunately, that's the reality of things. So you guys can let me know in the comment section what you think about my position, my opinions here. But yeah, thankfully the Ukrainians did not give in, and they did not allow the Trump administration to bully Ukraine so easily and so simply. And something that I think Trump respects to a certain degree. Now, last but not least, let's go more towards more positive news. And here, Ukraine pulled off a very successful mission against the Russians, and I want to share that story with you. So, according to Russian Telegram channels, and actually I've seen some videos as well of Russians complaining about it, they mentioned that 8 FPV drone operators were blinded because the Ukrainian special services continue to carry out subversive work within the Russian army using volunteer organizations. At the beginning of February, a series of sabotage attacks occurred in various units of the Russian armed forces, which consisted of remotely detonating goggles for FPV drones. A number of public organizations sent about 80 sets of FPV glasses to various units of the Russian armed forces. Our organizations received the goods from the same person on the terms of gratuitous assistance for the Russian armed forces. And so basically he just reiterated that a bunch of explosives and a detonator and a battery were found inside these FPV goggles, and the device is triggered when the cooling fan in the goggles is started. So basically they mined a bunch of these FPV goggles, and several Russian drone operators were either blinded, seriously injured, or even killed. So this reminded me of this successful mission that was pulled up by the Israeli Secret Service back in September of last year in this famous Israel pager attack against Hezbollah, where they injured thousands and killed several Hezbollah operatives by detonating these pagers, essentially intercepting these pagers in advance, planting explosives, and then having these pagers being given to these Hezbollah operatives, and then detonating it. And it was one of the most brilliant operations done by Israel. And Ukraine learned something from this. And I don't know, maybe Israel consulted the Ukrainians, who knows? But you're seeing that it's a brilliant operation that was done by the Ukrainians. And we know that FPV drone operators are very valuable for both sides. It is not something where you can learn flying an FPV drone in a matter of days or even weeks. It takes months, if not even years, to be a very good and experienced FPV drone operator. So we're seeing that the Ukrainians are also doing a lot of great work with regards to that, and hurting Russian drone operators as well, and injuring them and even killing them. And last but not least, in some more positive news, Europe is also, there is an announcement that Europe over the next few weeks, could be in the next few days as well, is preparing a 6 billion euros military aid package for Ukraine. And so we'll have more announcements over the next few days, perhaps maybe not days, but weeks. We'll see. But that is another very positive news. We're seeing that Europe is taking more and more of a lead, understanding that the United States might not be there anymore. And so they need to take a lead because they understand what's at stake here. This is not just your Ukrainian security, it's also European security at stake. And so, yes, there will still be a lot of disagreements within Europe, but I think we're seeing this awakening, especially in the past week. So with all that, guys, I hope you enjoyed my quick update. Let me know in the comment section if you agree, you disagree with my personal opinions, my analysis with regards to the US, Russian talks, the sabotage mission by the Ukrainians. And I'm eager to hear and read your opinions and your comments. With all that, guys, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Slava Ukraini!